All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming to join us today for this session. I'm very excited to introduce to you Reggie Kelly from PwC and Brian Lupson from Iron Mountain. They're going to talk to you today about the FinOps journey, not just to unit economics, but superior unit economics. Let's give it up for them.
Thank you, Amber. It's great to see so much excitement about unit economics. Just by way of introduction, I'm Reggie Kelly. I'm a partner at PwC. I lead our cloud economics and FinOps practice in the UK. I'm also PwC's global representative on the governing board for the FinOps Foundation. I work with organizations really in three areas. Firstly, helping them to mature their FinOps function and capability. Secondly, to deliver immediate cost savings to support cloud modernization activities. And then lastly, to really understand and measure cloud value, which really excited to be talking to you about today. And I'm joined by Brian Lupson. Do you want to do a quick intro, Brian?
Yeah, hey everyone. Brian Lupson, Senior Director at Iron Mountain, what we call Operational Governance, but layered into that is our FinOps enablement, or FinOps practice and our cloud enablement. And I've been on this journey since 2017, where I was doing cloud FinOps before I even knew what cloud FinOps was. So it's over the years, just seeing like just this turnout here and the turnout at the conference and just seeing how this has grown has really been amazing.
Great. So look, unit economics is clearly a topic area that gets talked about quite a lot. But for me, we're really just scratching the surface of using unit economics as a valuable tool to broaden out your conversations, not just with tech leaders within an organization, but with business stakeholders. You saw it earlier in JR's sort of keynote address. You know, you looked at the different areas, crawl, walk, run, and actually unit economics was on the far left. It was the furthest area on the left. So for me, a huge area to explore as collective FinOps practitioners. Really what we wanted to do today is sort of talk about, you know, how we're solving unit economics at Iron Mountain. Firstly, Brian will give a bit of a background about Iron Mountain as an organization, this FinOps journey that they've been on over the last few years. Secondly, talk about our approach to unit economics and how it helped to solve a particular challenge that Iron Mountain was facing. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about what's next and how it's really the project that we've worked on has enabled that broader business conversation. So over to you, Brian.
I'm just gonna, for those who don't know who Iron Mountain is, I'm just gonna do a quick brief one because my marketing team said I had to. So most people know Iron Mountain as a storage and shred company. We do way more than that. We store many different things from like artwork, stuff with the entertainment industry, wine. But more importantly, we get more into the asset lifecycle management. So how do we look at different assets, mostly physical, your servers, your laptops, your phones? How do you procure them? But most importantly, how do you destroy them when they're time to go? So make sure that your data is securely destroyed. And then over our journey, we've gotten more into the data centers. We've become a big colo company. But I think the more important one for this conversation is how we've gotten into digitization. So we're on our own journey. We're helping our clients. We have a lot of clients. We have 95% of the Fortune 1000. We're all on this journey together. So we're trying to help our clients move from their physical journey to their digitization. And one of the things we're doing is we're trying to bring what they have from physical and bring it into the digital age, scanning it, using things that allow them to connect that full journey as well. From our FinOps journey, I'm going to talk a little bit more on the left one pretty quickly, because I think a lot of what's on the left are people are doing or understand pretty heavily. You know, getting to a single pane of glass, doing your cost optimization and your value. We do full chargeback, so all usage goes back to the business unit that's consuming that usage. The two that I think were most interesting to me or in our journey to get here was cloud enablement. So we found that we were really struggling with what was in the cloud. How do we know what it's used for? How do we know how to charge it back? How do we bring that information to bear? So we centralize all enablement. So if anyone in Iron Mountain wants to use the cloud for whatever purpose, they have to go through our enablement team. And we assign that with IS, so we have security presence, architecture to make sure they're following standards, and then we have FinOps at that same gate to get into the door. So now we know when things are getting in, we know the purpose, we get some forecasting data, and then we can really attribute that cost. The other one was the FinOps metadata. We started in the very beginning, I think like a lot of us, tagging policies. We got to make sure we're tagging, make sure we're getting that data in. What we started to learn was that data sometimes was very inaccurate. Engineers, DevOps, a lot of times they don't know some of the metadata that we want to capture. And there's some things that they would never know. And then we have things that change all the time, like reorgs. So we started layering FinOps metadata that was used for our purposes after the fact. So we still have our tagging data, but layering that other metadata on top of it. I'm actually kind of interested from the crowd. Is that also something that you all kind of felt that you needed to layer something on top of it to really tell the true story? Yeah, it really was something that we learned pretty quickly. So I'm going to shift to the right. Well, yeah, we're going to talk shift left, but we're going to shift to the right of the screen to just talk a little bit about things that we're starting to do now. We either started that journey or we're into that journey already. Cloud forecasting, I mean, there's several sessions going on today and tomorrow. That has always been a struggle for us. We're continuing to try to evolve that. I'm trying to sit on some sessions to learn how we can do it better. But that is one that we're always really trying to push forward and make changes to. Shift left, obviously we're trying to do, I think JR spoke a little about it this morning in the keynote. How do you push this FinOps data to the left? How do you get in front of our product teams, in front of teams to understand it from the beginning, not after the fact when we're trying to chase them down? The one that was very surprising to me, also was talked about this morning with JR, is the whole kind of +1. So around 8 months ago, my CAO came to me and said, I want you to start looking at SAM. I want you to start looking at software. I want you to apply your FinOps practice to SaaS management. That's something I did not see coming at all. I think I was so it was heads down on what we were doing with cloud. That was kind of a shock. I did not see that development coming, but it's been very interesting on, even with the unit economics conversation, on how we're trying to get some of that information to tell the story. And then the other two of how we start getting into the containers and understanding costs there, and the 360 unit economics. We're going to talk a little bit more later about those, but those are the other two that we're really, really pushing on hard and trying to get that into our enterprise. Reggie, like this is my kind of tunnel vision view from Iron Mountain. I mean, you see a broader view. Like, how are you seeing kind of these journeys happening?
So definitely we are seeing the sort of evolution and kind of scope increase from a FinOps perspective and the organizations that we work with. So, you mentioned license management, software asset management, looking at areas, of course, in sustainability. But I suppose the evolution of, FinOps that I've seen over the last 2 or 3 years is, starting from most organizations had gone through their sort of cloud migration, probably done a lift and shift, and therefore very suboptimal from an overall architecture and infrastructure perspective. So a lot of the early work that we did with our clients was to help to optimize their existing estate, and to sort of answer that question from a CFO of, you told us that this was going to cost actually a lot less in moving to cloud. Why is it actually costing 2 or 3 times more? Well, we've actually migrated the inefficiency in the data center into the cloud. So a lot of the work that we did 2 to 3 years ago was all around cost optimization. That then evolved into, okay, now we've done that optimization. We want to be able to sustain that on an ongoing basis. So therefore, a lot of the work that we did was around FinOps maturity assessments and helping organizations understand where they were against the FinOps domains, capabilities, and doing some benchmarking around that to evolve their capability from a FinOps perspective. But nowadays, the conversations that I'm having on almost a weekly basis is where an organization has done the cost optimization, they've plugged in resources from a FinOps perspective, but they're not able to articulate why our cost is going up to business stakeholders. So, a couple of weeks ago, I was meeting with a large bank, and it was someone from finance, and they said, well, all I'm being told is that cloud is valuable, cloud is something that we need to do, but I've seen our costs go up over the last few months, over the last year quite substantially, and nobody's able to tell me why. And the conversation that they don't want to have is a purely unit metric conversation. So, cost per gigabyte, cost per CPU, that's not language that someone in finance can really sort of understand. So, they, much more want to, have a conversation around customer profitability, around product service profitability. So definitely seeing a shift of focus from cost optimization, maturing FinOps functions, into now we need to articulate whether or not the spend is good or bad spend. So that's just over the last couple of years how I've seen FinOps evolve.
Yeah. So we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about the problem statement of how do we get closer to kind of what Reggie was saying. How do we get closer to like a real unit economics? How do we show value, not just cost, but value to the stuff we're doing? The first challenge we kind of dove into is as we move more to containers and we move more to multi-tenancy, how do we start seeing costs per client? So if you have a multi-tenant where you have 5 or 6 clients in it and you have a shared service going over the top, how can you start understanding how much each client is consuming of that shared service? Or at least get directionally correct. If we can't get 100%, can we get it to a point where directionally we can start showing to drive really what that profitability or unit economics is for that client? So bringing in PwC, we really kind of dove into how we can start diving into that and start showing that value. Reggie, you want to talk a little bit about the process we did?
Yeah, sure. So, overall, from an approach perspective, one of the things that, we had to sort of look at is, again, we didn't want to just have a conversation with, technical engineering teams. We wanted to be able to support business level conversations. And therefore, as Brian said, the key challenge that we had in assessing the requirements was we had situations where we had one individual EC2 instance that had up to 25 different customers on one instance. And therefore, very difficult to attribute individual costs because obviously you're getting a cost at the end of the month or in Cloudability that only shows it at a cloud resource level. And therefore difficult to attribute individual customers. So the business was saying, well, we don't understand whether or not a particular customer is profitable. So therefore, what we did was we designed an approach where we looked at doing a proof of concept for a sample of customers across both sort of a multi-tenancy arrangement, but also single tenants. And I'll just kind of take you through that approach, high-level approach now. So as I said, the challenge that we had was around the cloud costs and not being able to disaggregate them and apportion them to individual customers. So what we did was we looked in Cloudability. We were able to look at the individual costs from a compute, from a database, all of the sort of areas that we all work with day to day, and put those into individual cost pools. So we tried to map them loosely to the focus kind of cost areas, but we were also looking at what actually really drives behavior. What are the key drivers from a cost perspective? So in this instance, the example here is pulling them into the database costs. So looking at RDS, DynamoDB, and really summarizing that into one database cost pool. Then we looked at allocating those. We needed to allocate the individual customers. And in order to do that, we had to look at, and this is a really important point, we had to look at other data. We couldn't just look at cloud resource data. We had to provide that 360-degree view, we had to look at application metadata. So things like number of users per customer, number of documents stored, the total storage attributable to each individual customer. In the example of database costs, we really looked at that total document size, with the thought being that the larger the documents stored, the more capacity it's going to take up in the database. Obviously, other areas like compute are somewhat different, and we were looking at other areas like application users, the number of users, et cetera. But Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about the challenges that you had previously of getting a different set of data that wasn't just coming in from the cost APIs?
Yeah, it was interesting as we got kind of dove more into it and started getting to kind of where Reggie was just talking about. And when we started our journey, it was very, very easy to get cloud data in front of people. Like, this is how much you're spending, this is how much you're using, this is how much that we're sending out each month. When we started getting to this next level, we found it even harder to get in front of people. Senior leaders didn't want to spend time talking about it. They're like, okay, I understand what I spend. They didn't want us to get into the engineering and talk a little bit more how we can get into some of that application data to really start telling the story. So, frustrating or not, we brought PwC in and Reggie to kind of help us with this pilot, really help us tell the story and kind of use the brand of PwC to get to the senior leaders. And very quickly when we met with them, it felt like their ears were perking up, like, oh, what is this? Like, how can I really understand this? So it was a little frustrating that the same message we were trying to get through, we had to bring in a third party to help us. But either way, it got us to where we are actually having conversations now. We're actually talking to engineering teams. We're actually able to get some of that data out and really start attributing it to the entitlements of some of our customers, some of the costs, really start like trying to tie some of that together and start bringing some of the SaaS costs and really showing that whole 360 view. So yeah, that was definitely a challenge to kind of break through. But honestly, now that we've broken through, we've seen some significant strides in where that's going to lead us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and certainly. So after we were able to get some of the other sort of data from the individual applications, that then allowed us to apply a model to attribute individual costs per customer. Now, importantly, if you are looking for true unit economics and going back to what our original problem was, we wanted to be able to tell the story of customer profitability. And in order to do that, we couldn't just focus on the cost side of the equation. We needed to also understand what's the revenue, what's the other side of the equation, what's the revenue that we're getting from those individual customers in order to tell that story of profitability. So we brought in each one of the customers, we went through the contractual information to pull out the revenue data. So just wanted to kind of illustrate what this looked like in practice. So as I said in the previous slide, in the example, if you just follow the thread from a database perspective, we were getting we were getting individual database costs that we then looked at putting into a cost pool of databases. We then were able, using the allocation method, to allocate individual, based upon the document size, we were able to attribute specific costs per customer. And we did that across 8 different cost pools. And so, looking at it from the first image to the second image, we were able to kind of disaggregate down to the customer level. And I think the important thing here is that we weren't looking for 100% accuracy. You could make the argument that there's other data points that we're looking for that would make the model a lot more accurate. But when we went down, we looked at, okay, across the individual customers, and then when you add the revenue, one thing became very clear. So obviously this is illustrative data, but it's not too far off in terms of what we were seeing. We saw circumstances where, first of all, logging was 21% of the overall cost. So therefore, anything that we can do to reduce our logging costs obviously has a direct impact on customer profitability. The second thing we noticed was that if we apportion the individual costs to each customer, we then have this scenario where customer B versus customer C. As you can see, customer B has a very high cost, and that's because we looked at the total documents stored, the size of those documents, as well as the number of users, it was near the top in terms of the one EC2 instance at the application level. But then if you looked at customer C, they had a very low number of customers, but customer B and customer C were getting the same amount of monthly revenue. So therefore, from a profitability perspective, and that's going back to the point of we weren't looking for 100% accuracy, but when you step back from it, we've got one customer that has near on the most users, the most documents stored, but they're actually getting similar revenue as one that is driving way less customer behavior. So therefore, we were able to have a conversation with the commercial teams about, okay, what's going on with customer B? How do we then look at different pricing options? And maybe you want to come in here and just talk about some of the broader impact that this has had within Iron Mountain.
Yeah, it really kind of led us to really talking to the commercial teams and making sure that we're understanding how they're pricing. Obviously they have some price calculator that I don't think anyone's ever really been engaged with or really from a tech side. So we're really trying to help them and kind of shift left, get information up to them because this was pretty jarring on how they're pricing stuff, how they're selling stuff. So we're trying to help arm them with more information. So whether it's based on industry, whether it's based on type of customer, or number of documents, or number of users, that we can really have them understand the best way to price so we don't get in the scenario where B is yielding very little or no margin, where some customers are yielding where we would rather see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is where, going back to the earlier point I was making of allowing us to, as FinOps practitioners, to have a broader conversation with the business. If we only focus on technical metrics, we'd only be having a conversation with the tech team or doing cost optimization. But this, when we had a conversation with the CTO, with the commercial leads, they were very interested in how they then price in the market. What are the different attributes that we look at? And that's obviously had an impact on the different discussions we could have with across the persona groups. So do you want to talk a little bit about the persona groups?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of seen this through the different slides and this morning with JR. We really focused heavily in the beginning on kind of the ones at the bottom, or engineers too. But how we get to the leaderships, how we understand who the FinOps practitioners are, how to get them into the adjacent businesses, really working with procurement to make sure we understand cost, and then obviously finance. But if we go up to the top in those three, I think that's really what this kind of journey has led us to, is how do we get to the product team? How do we feed them this information? How do we shift left and get it to them in the way that they can start understanding? And then like Reggie was just talking about, how do we get into the commercial team? How do we really let them understand what is needed to go sell? What is needed to make Iron Mountain successful? And how they understand what FinOps even is. When we started the conversation with the commercial team, they had no idea what we were talking about. They just, they understood what we were doing in the cloud, but how that really impacted them and how they sell, I don't think they really grasped. And we're really trying to break down that wall. And I think we said earlier, FinOps is for everyone. I think someone said this morning. It really is. It's their responsibility too, as part of understanding what is needed. And we have to arm them the right way. And the same with the engineering. As we were talking, we need to start engaging them in different ways. We always engage engineering on how to be more thoughtful or how to bring costs down. But now we also are engaging them on how they can release information from the applications that can help us attach more information around that full economic view. So it's kind of changed some of the demographics of who we're talking to and how we're talking to them. And it's really unlocked a lot of doors to really get the message out a lot broader.
Yeah. Can I just have a show of hands in terms of who is engaging, well, firstly, on unit economics within their organizations? Okay, so some people are so-so, but Yeah. So, and then I think, secondly, for those of you that are kind of working or doing unit economics within your organization, are you having conversations with a broader set of business stakeholders, like a commercial team, or is it more focused on technical metrics? So, who's having a conversation with Okay, so.
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's really what we've seen with the clients that I work with, is that the conversation is solely about cost optimization, about technical unit metrics. It's not enough around, is customer A profitable? And that's what we tried to solve through this, through the work that we've been doing. But then also looking at what are the next steps? So, now that we've proven out that we can have that broader business conversation, that we can look at metrics that are much closer and in the language that a finance person, a commercial person understands, how can we look to build an enduring solution? Now, what we built as a proof of concept wasn't scalable from the standpoint of, we wanted to be able to, it was very reactive. We want to, shift left, as Brian said, to be able to, what are the sort of data points that we need? So things like, application activity. There were a whole host of metrics that we wanted to get from the application that we actually weren't able to get, and therefore, the model wasn't as accurate as it could be. Well, now we're developing a new platform, or Iron Mountain's developing a new platform. So being on the front foot in the product design phase, as they're rolling out the new platform, to be able to say, these are the metrics that we need. This is perhaps the APIs that we need now exposed to us, so that we could make, deliver the insight that would inform those decisions. So things like customer onboarding, we need to make sure that we're including that early on in the process. Cloud resource onboarding. So there's a number of different things that we're now looking to build this as an enduring solution. But look, we're not at the end of that journey. This is very much just a journey at the moment, and it sounds like, or it looks like, a lot of you are on that kind of unit economic journey as well. So kind of one key takeaway that I'd have is that, really, if you're adopting unit economics within your respective organizations, I would challenge you to think about whether or not that unit economic metric is a problem that the business understands. So not just we want to be able to expose things like cost per CPU, but here it was a matter of we can't understand whether or not our customers are profitable. So my key takeaway would be, in your unit economic journey, think about that key business problem. Just start there, one key business problem, and pilot it from there. Any kind of key takeaways that you would have, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying, Reggie, we did it as kind of a small POC at first. We, even at Iron Mountain, want to broaden this out. We want to do it to other applications. We want to get, keep shifting left. But I think my key takeaway is kind of as you keep unlocking new data, just keep pressing it to, try to get to the commercial teams, try to keep pressing on the engineering teams, get to senior leaders, to let them know that this can drive change. I mean, we're all really change agents. If you really think about it, what we're doing from a FinOps perspective, or either whether it's bringing costs down or showing value, that's all change that we're trying to do to help the company be successful. So it's really, as you kind of keep unlocking that new data, is going to that area and just keep pressing on it, whether you have to bring PwC in or not, but you can just keep showing that value, because it will show value. And then, like Reggie was saying, it's like, how can we make this sustainable too for us? So like, how can we apply this where it was very manual? Like, we were trying to get to this data. A lot of it was manual. We were able to get great, crisp data out of Cloudability, but everything else really was hard to get to. So how can we start sourcing some of that entitlement information into like our data lake? How can we start getting some of these APIs available so the application is making it where we can then pull that in and start really bringing the data together to show it holistically? And I don't know what time it is, but we're also going to try to apply some AI to it. So I don't know how far we made it in without saying it, but definitely want to take advantage of some automation and AI and really like how we can leverage that to also keep pushing that data left to allow people to have that information to be successful instead of chasing it at the end.
Yeah, surely, and that's what I've been quite pleasantly surprised with is just, how much excitement there's been within Iron Mountain about getting this level of data. And when we were speaking to kind of the commercial lead, he was talking about what we put into our contracts with our customers. If we were able to determine, what are the areas that drive drive costs from a cloud perspective, then we would be able to put those metrics into the customer contracts. And it's certainly something that I've been pleasantly surprised with. So it's been really great to be a part of this journey. So we'll just leave it there in terms of the content. But any questions with anything we've went over?
Well, before we kick that off, let's give these guys a big round of applause. That was quite a session. Thank you so much, Reggie and Brian. That was wonderful. We do have 10, 15 minutes for questions. So who wants to kick us off here? Way in the back. All right, I shouldn't have come all the way up here.
Thanks for the talk. I have a two-part question. So I'm not sure if I understood correctly that this was a proof of concept at first with your challenge there.
Yeah.
My question is, first, how do you anticipate you would approach this, or if you've already thought about this, having multiple layers of applications, because they're not always directly linked to customer success. You have some shared software that you need to sort of distribute across multiple levels. And then the second question, probably going towards TBM, think maybe that you're currently only looking at 100% cloud costs, nothing else, which is an easy calculation. But once you have to add a bunch of other cost types into it, it gets more difficult. How would you approach that going forward, I guess?
Yeah. Do you want to take the application one and I'll take the TBM one?
Sure.
Yeah.
But no, you're exactly right. We kind of talked a little bit more just about the cloud pieces, but there's obviously, I brought up in the beginning, from a SaaS perspective, how do you allocate costs for the different SaaS applications? That gets very tricky as you start layering on these different aspects to it. We're working very heavily with our vendors as partners to like how we can get their data in, how we can attribute it a lot easier. Like I said, it's kind of with the journey, you kind of peel one away and you're like, I think I have a handle on this part, and then you go to the next level and you're like, all right, now this one's complicated too. And we're trying to learn from that along the way. It's all going to be a learning process. All these applications, how they're built, how they scale are always different. So it's just continuously to attack it and then use it towards like future applications. We do have a lot of overlap, so we can take some of that overlap and apply it again, and some of it's going to be net new. But you're right, it is difficult when you kind of start aspecting the different levels of the things that wrap around this whole 360 view.
Yeah, and certainly, it's a great question around the TBM kind of linkage. And actually, over the last 24 hours, I've had a number of conversations around this topic, including with some people in the room today. And I guess my thoughts on it, it's similar to the whole evolution of FinOps, as we heard earlier in the keynote. This idea of scopes. We've obviously had a lot of success as a FinOps community looking at cloud. Now we're being asked to look at the data center around SaaS or licenses, that sort of thing. In this world, we're looking at things like this example of looking at customer profitability is purely from a cloud perspective, but if we wanted to get a truer picture of overall cost, obviously there's other things that we would need to look at. We would need to look at people costs. We need to look at far more things that are much more closely aligned to TBM. My personal perspective is that I'm not trying to recreate what TBM is doing. I'm trying to have a more meaningful conversation around the business value of cloud, and I think that this goes a long way to do that.
All right, next question is right next to him.
Hi, thank you. So my question goes on a direction of when you were trying to pick the cost drivers, did you did it in a centralized way, or did you ask each team what drive their costs?
So did we try to do the cost drivers in a centralized way, or, sorry?
So when you were picking the cost drivers, did you approach each team and ask for the cost driver, or did you say, hey, your cost driver is this, by the way?
So what we tried to do was we tried to first understand what are the things that would drive costs from a cloud perspective, and therefore we had a list of several cost drivers that we wanted to get data on. But then that's back to the challenge that Brian talked about. Because this is very reactive, it was an existing platform. A lot of the data points that we wanted and cost drivers that we thought would be helpful in building out a more accurate model, actually we weren't able to get in an easy way. And certainly it wouldn't be scalable if we looked at doing it on a much wider scale. Hence why we're pivoting the work that we're doing now into the new platform. So we can take advantage of that kind of shift left concept of, okay, well, product design, as we implement the new platform, this is the type of information that we need. Anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I think to your point, I mean, it was. Every time we got to a new cost driver, sometimes we had to go to that team and really understand what was making that happen, like what was the purpose of it, how is it implemented. So there was a lot of conversations that we got to each driver of like getting with that team, trying to understand, which was very difficult in the beginning. But now we've got a lot more traction to try to understand it better. But yeah, I think a lot of the cost drivers, we had to go to that individual team, whether it be the product team, the architecture team, the engineering team, or when we got outside of the scope to the commercial team, like what's driving these entitlements? Like how are you coming up with these costs or these sale points? So it was almost every one of them we had to engage with someone differently sometimes.
Yeah, but I think it's kind of evolved in that, the conversation with your CIO and the value that we've demonstrated has helped to say, actually,
absolutely.
We need this level of data, and it's going to be very important. It's going to be very important because we need to be able to price more accurately in the market with our customers. We don't want the situation of customer B that was wholly unprofitable, that no one really was able to tell until we surfaced that insight.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's come out of it is our initial conversations with these different teams for these cost drivers. Well, it was pretty difficult. They understood it, they answered our questions, but they really weren't engaged. And now that we've engaged at senior leadership, it's getting pushed down, they seem much more engaged. And they want to make changes because we're going to start reporting at these different levels. So they can start, senior leaders can see, are we making improvements? How can we understand this better? How can we show that view? So the teams are feeling more empowered, I guess, to actually do this and be engaged and try to get that information for us in a more streamlined way.
Hi. First of all, apologies if I'm getting too much into the detail, but then there was one thing on the second slide which really interested me. So I saw that you blend all the database services into, or maybe third one, the one with the even one further.
Oh, the spreadsheet one?
The one with the
spreadsheet one.
Yeah, this one.
This one.
This one. You blend all the database services into one cost pool, and then you calculate unit cost based on that. My question is, because if I understand correctly, and the database services which is used is use case specific. So this way you will appear, those which require more advanced database services like Dynamo will appear less expensive than they really are, and the one which requires simple ones will have higher unit cost than they really do. So meaning that the customers which are really having some advanced use cases will be less profitable than they really are, and the ones which are simple will be more profitable than they really are in your calculation. I'm sure you you saw that and you accounted for that. But the question is, on what basis did you make such simplification to blend all the database cost into one? What was the driver here? And maybe I simply don't understand the business here. Right?
Oh, how we got down, just how we simplified it into that one line? I think, well, most of this is just for presentation perspectives, but, but yeah, I don't know if you want to talk a little about it, but I think it was just more how we can start the message to show it this way, but obviously this gets a lot granular when you start getting into what's the purpose of that, what's being used for, how the data is being stored.
Yeah, and we'd be happy to. We've got some of the team that are here that was helping to deliver this work to get down into more detail. But again, we're not. The important thing is not to be 100% accurate with this. As you can see, the database costs actually don't contribute as much as some of the other areas. So yes, we might be able to be more accurate with database costs, but the main challenge here is logging costs were 21% of the overall costs, and compute and storage were the largest areas. So therefore we were more confident in user storage and those sorts of things, looking at compute and storage.
Another
Yes.
one? Okay.
Hi, I think quick question for Brian. I think we've heard a lot about shift left, and you talked about shift left. What does shift left really mean for you in Iron Mountain?
For shift left? Yeah. Well, it's really twofold. I think we talked a little bit more, kind of dove in about shift left to the commercial side of it. How do we get them the data? For shift left to product, we've really pushed to the architecture and the product teams. Iron Mountain already had toll gates along the way of the process, so we've tried to layer our FinOps practice in those toll gates. And we're capturing that information along the way, so we can see during product design, during architecture, during development, during testing, like all the way out the door. During the toll gates, we layer FinOps in again and again and again. And then we kind of show the waves of how costs are going with it. And then when we get out the door at the final toll gate of even like cab, we even added toll gates. Even added FinOps to the cab toll gate. So we're able to show to leadership how we're starting to apply some of these principles of FinOps along the way. And I think it was at the DC summit a couple weeks ago, and I think the way JR described it, which I really like, is as you shift left, you're pulling right. So you shift left, you get up as forward as you can, but as it keeps moving down, you're shifting the same concepts along the way and pushing those same principles along the way and doing these checks and balances along the way. So when you actually go out the door, a lot of what we've been doing for years is trying to solve the problem as it's in prod or as you're consuming. So we want to try to move it out. So shift left to us is just get as much of the FinOps embedded in discussions into the starting places, and then as it's going across, as it goes out the door, and then obviously out the door, the things we do. And then the stuff with the commercial organization as well. How can we get some of this information to arm them so that they can be more impactful with what they're doing?
Yeah. And I think for me, the JR said, earlier today, it's about being FinOps aware, not just cost aware.
Yeah.
I think that's the really important distinction in the concept of shifting left, because as we've seen here, what are the things that drive customer behavior? What are the things that drive cloud costs? And being able to, put that into, being able to shift left and have that be in the product decisions, expose those APIs and that sort of thing.
One over here.
Yep. All right. Thank you. Yeah. I guess the great story here is that you were able to take that profitability data and look at the revenue and the commercial side of it.
Yeah.
But did having that profitability view help drive your cost optimization, right? Because you're saying 21% spent on logging. Well, did that refocus the effort, because that might change a customer from profitable, unprofitable to profitable, right? So I'm sure as FinOps, everyone in this room would first start looking at the cost rather than going to the revenue. But I don't want to detract from that story of going to the revenue.
Yeah.
No, it's a good call. It absolutely did. Like we were saying, how do we get to what these costs are related to? That gave us information to go talk to the team of what are we logging? How long are we holding this data for? What's the purpose of it? Oddly enough, we kind of had a different column for security, and we found that most of it was requirements from security driving what we needed from logging, which then we pushed back and said, do we really need all this? Is this really what we want to do? So it did start the conversation, and it really allowed us to then take that data. So again, some of our core tendencies of like optimization, we definitely took that back as part of this exercise and started pushing, how can we bring that down? So yes, it definitely led to that conversation, which was great.
Yeah, and we're not saying that that side of the equation isn't something that we need to focus on. Obviously, it's important to focus on cost optimization. But doing this exercise, as you said, helped to shine a light on customer profitability. And there's two levers to that. One is, we could look at how to price better in the market. Secondly, we could look at how to reduce the cost base through things like optimizing how we do logging.
Just like they say, it's not about saving money, it's about making money, right? All right, who's next? Any other questions? Or are Reggie and Brian off the hook? Another round of applause. Thank you so much, guys. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. I hope you enjoy this video as much as I enjoy sharing all of these amazing FinOps stories, best practices, and expertise. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and leave comments and questions for our speakers. Check out more FinOps X content on our YouTube channel. We appreciate the support.